What's up, Canes? What's up, man? Big win for Miami again last night. Playing well. Playing well. And it's funny because kind of like it feels like a brag, but like it's also just like what me and Dusty were saying Saturday night on that space has basically turned out exactly what we said. It's like don't panic. The team's playing well. Like they got a great chance of winning on Sunday with like pitching matchup, etc. And this team's better than people think it is. And ultimately, that's what's happened, right, Gaines? Like Miami wins on Sunday. They win yesterday. They won on Tuesday. So like got a little streak going into UConn, which again, like let's you win against UConn. Again, UConn's always better than their kind of rated preseason. They're always better. And so like you win against UConn, you're going into ACC play really, and you need to be right because Florida or Miami's got the gauntlet early in ACC play. Nick, what's up, man? Good afternoon. I made a live show. Love it, dude. Dedication, making adjustments in life just to show up for the live. That's awesome. So we're going to talk about some matchups, obviously, this coming weekend. What are going to be some of the best ones to look at? So we'll be talking about that. We're going to talk about a couple interesting stories as well before I gotta skedaddle. Canes, we have a chance to be 14-3 before the gauntlet. Yeah, I mean you really do, really do. Again, just because, and we'll look at UConn. Actually, while we're letting everybody get in here, we'll kind of do a little dive on UConn and just kind of see what their team's doing stats wise. Again, guys, like when you're looking at stats can only tell you so much. But again, I mean, this team may not be quite as good as we're used to seeing out of UConn. And again, it's early. Looking at we'll look at their numbers here. I'll pull it up for you guys. And so UConn's 2-7 to start. Right now, they've been on the road the whole time. Again, the tough thing for those Northeast schools and just like cold weather schools in general is that you just really don't get a great opportunity to play at home early, and you just can't be outside as much. You can't get the necessary work, and like some of these programs have really nice indoor facilities, but it's still not a baseball field, right? And you're not able to have as close to game like environments and situations that the warm weather schools are able to. So that's a disadvantage. So again, like UConn could start 2-7 and still end up being really good, but let's look at their numbers because they're 2-7 right now. Dusty, what's up, man? Well, we meet again. We meet again. Afternoon, gents. Dusty, it's funny that like kind of what we predicted about Miami on Saturday night, to the chagrin of a few people, has been exactly right. They win Sunday, they win Tuesday against FIU, they win last night, and they're looking good. And I mean, I think I was on the space last or 2 nights ago, and basically looking at the numbers. I mean, Miami's pitching staff is pitching like an elite pitching staff in the country right now. They got a 1.03 WHIP as a team. Like that's insane. They're striking out a bunch of dudes. Like they're just not allowing base runners. So like that, they're pitching at an elite level. But let's look at UConn. Okay, so offensively, they're hitting 295, 11 doubles, one triple, 14 homers in 9 games. So 26 extra base hits in 9 games. So right at 3 extra base hits per game. Again, kind of just in that like okay category. It's not bad, but it's not amazing. 34. I mean, here's a little something concerning. I mean, 34 walks. They're just above 10% walk rate, and they're over a 20% walk rate, 20% strikeout rate, or kind of right at 20%. So that you want to see that number a little closer together. Defensively, 10 errors in 9 games. Like they're not playing amazing defense either. And then pitching, this will tell the whole story, right? Like, don't even look at ERA right now. Just look at, 76 innings pitched, 98 hits given up. So way more hits than innings pitched, 51 walks on top of that. So you're talking basically 150 base runners in 76 innings. Their whip's at 2, and that's not including the hit by pitches 12. So their whip is over 2.0, which again, like it's going to be really tough to win games with a whip over 2 as a staff if you don't have a very elite offense. Never had a doubt. Had to walk Canes off the edge for a minute. Yeah, a lot of those guys were kind of like, calling for JD to be gone and everything. And it's like, guys, like you're on the road against a team that's projected to be much better than you, and you're playing them tight 2 games, and then you beat them handedly on Sunday. So again, like Canes, for me, just looking at these numbers, I just don't think that I would be surprised if Miami doesn't sweep this at home, because Miami's strength is the pitching, and UConn's like best part of their team right now is the offense, but it's like nothing special. It's just like, okay, it's decent, but it's not like this. This isn't, you wouldn't call this like a strength right now. You'd just call it like, yeah, their offense is pretty good. The pitching staff is a massive weakness right now with how they're throwing. So again, you probably have, one weekend starter who's going to be, that's going to be tough, but like Miami just matches up so well pitching wise that, and again, like Miami's offense is going to be, is definitely better than UConn's right now. UConn's only scored 62 runs in 9 games. So, UConn's scoring right at about 7 runs per game, which again it's not bad, but there's nothing special about it. And so, I do think Miami wins this series, has a good chance to sweep, just with how good their pitching has been. No doubt about that. Like, let's look at Miami for a second. Let's just look at their numbers. And don't worry, I'll pull it back up. But even when I first looked at these numbers like last week, I was like, this is crazy. And then again, for you to have faced a University of Florida and still come out with these kind of numbers as a pitching staff, like look at these pitching numbers, Dusty. 1.02 whip. So it went down again. Going into the midweek games, it was 1.05. And in the 2 midweek games, it's gone down to 1.02. So, just really insane numbers. Just look at it. 120 innings pitched, 81 hits, and then 42 walks, and 15 hit by pitch. So, again, you're killing it if you're Miami right now. You're killing it as a pitching staff. 160 strikeouts in 120 innings. You're giving up 21 extra base hits in 14 games. So again, you're giving up like less than 2 extra base hits per game, which is just insane. Again, it's just like you're not walking guys, you're not giving up extra base hits. Like it's going to be very tough for teams to score runs. Tate DeRias looked nasty. Yeah, and he's looked nasty so far, right? 4 1/3, 2 hits, 0 walks, 5 strikeouts. Like, it should have went down even more. They counted a run to Lumpkin when it should have been an error on our second baseman. Yeah, which is fine though. Dude, the only reason Florida won on Friday is a couple of home runs. Yeah, and again, it's like Saturday, it's like 2-0 in the 8th. Like the offense was just stifled. Pitching staff did exactly what they needed to do to win. Friday, Florida hits a couple home runs to take to win the game. Like again, it's like you're in the game if one swing can tie the game or take the lead. Like if you can tie the game, if you're within 4 runs in this kind of offensive environment, you're in the game. Like this, like you're not getting beat. And so I do think Miami is there really is like 2 sleepers in the ACC this year. It's Georgia Tech and Miami, because Georgia Tech has the elite offense and the pitching staff is doing better. Miami's got the elite pitching staff so far with both teams, and the offense is doing enough. The offense is actually like performing better than than even like the numbers would say, like, because they're actually scoring more runs than you would think if you look at the numbers. They've got let's see, they've got, where is it? Runs scored. 123 runs scored in 14 games. So they're not that, they're scoring right around 9 runs per game. So it, like, they're putting up that's good. Again, it's not like in that elite category, but it's close. It's in the like really good category. And so again, if Miami can do this, like if these numbers don't oscillate too much in ACC play, Miami has not only as a regional team, but like if they can, again, like Dusty, we went over the schedule. Like if they can survive these first 3 weekends in the ACC, they have Wake Forest, they have Florida State, UNC. Like if they can go 4-5 in those series, they're in really good position because then the schedule gets way easier, way easier. There's definitely 5 series that Miami should win. So those are 5 series where you should be, 10-5. So you add on top of that these 3 series. Let's say you go 4-5, you're 14-10 with 2 series to go. So how do you do in those 2 series? Like that is I think that's the key for Miami's ACC schedule. Like if they just don't get swept in these first 3 series, even if they lose all 3, they're 3-6, but then they should go minimum 10-5 in the other 5 in the 5 series that they should win. And then again, you're 13-11. You're above 500 and you got 2 series left. So I think Miami's got legitimate. Again, it's like sleeper status, but I think Miami legitimately has a chance at hosting legitimately. Now, Georgia Tech, the reason I say that about Georgia Tech, and let's look at the schedule for Miami just so you guys can see this. Look back historically. Looks like a top 6 finish cements you as a host in the ACC. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, top 6. Like if you're at the very front end of like the middle of the pack. And again, it's like if you go 17-13 in the ACC, you're a host. I think just without a doubt. At 16-14, it's like you're in the conversation, but it's probably like on the lesser side of like 50-50. But let's see here. What's up, Coog? How you doing, man? All right, so this is the 7-8 is dicey. Yeah, 7-8, you're in the conversation, but it's like you're at like the 30% chance maybe. If you got an if you got an AD on the committee, maybe you're hosting. So like this is the whole ACC schedule. If Miami can survive these 3, so they're at Wake Forest to start off the ACC, not this weekend but next weekend. Wake Forest, I think, is like number 15 in the country right now. They're not like the elite Wake Forest that from the last couple of years, but they're still a really good team. Then you got Florida State, who I think is the best team in the ACC. Like they got 3 monsters on the weekend. Like they're 3, I believe, left-handed just monsters. They all have like 24 strikeouts in 15 innings with like no walks, not a lot of hits given up, and their ERAs are all like 1 or lower. It's insane. So I think Florida State is the best team in the ACC just because their weekend rotation is unbelievable. Like, and then UNC, I think, even though UNC is ranked higher right now, I think Florida State ends up being the best team. So you play Florida State at Miami, so that's huge. Like if you can, I mean, seriously, if you can win 1 in this series, you feel really good about yourself. If Miami wins any of these series, they're in great position. They're in a great position. At North Carolina, again, really good team, but like Miami just matches up so well pitching wise. It's insane. Like I think Miami is going to be projected to lose all 3 of these. If they can steal a win and then not get swept in these first 3 series, they're in such good position because then they go to Pitt. They should win that. They have the pitching to sweep it. Then they go to Duke, who Duke has not been playing well. Again, we'll have to see, or they don't go to Duke. Duke's at home. So again, I think this is a series win for Miami. Then they play Georgia Tech at home. This is going to be a battle of like, does Georgia Tech score enough runs? Does Miami's pitching staff shut down the offense? Like, I think this is like a 50-50. It is at Miami. I think it's one of those 50-50 series right now because they just both have obvious strengths. And again, they're like Georgia Tech's pitching is not a weakness. It's just not a strength right now. And then Miami's offense is not a weakness, but it's just not a strength. So this is like a really even matchup again. So I'm not even calling that one way or the other. Boston College, like Miami should win this. Again, like this is a series they can sweep. NC State has kind of started looking better, but I just don't think NC State's nearly as good as they were picked preseason. So I think Miami wins this. It's at home again. And then obviously this is a tough matchup. Depends how Virginia's playing late in the season. But again, even if Miami's probably, depending on how they play, like if you looked at this beginning of the season, Miami's projected to lose this. It's on the road. It's at Virginia. But again, like they can. This is an okay series to lose, right? It's all about when you do lose series. Like, do you not get swept in the ACC? Getting swept kills you. Just ask Georgia Tech last year against Boston College at home. They got swept. It killed them. It made them have to sweat on decision day instead of like being for sure in. And like if they had won that series, they were in the host conversation. Notre Dame at home, like this is a must win. Like not a must win, but like they're going to be projected to win this. Chance to sweep. When you have elite pitching, you have a chance to sweep every. You have a chance to sweep every weekend against like teams you should win. We should win against. Let's see here. Jeremy, son trying out for high school baseball his freshman year. Coach asks him to play catcher. He hasn't played catcher since he was 12. Third base, right-hand pitcher, his main position, and he won't catch on his summer travel team. How to handle? This is what I would say, Jeremy. I mean, listen, do his best, right? Like the more versatile you are in your defensive positioning now, the better as far as recruiting goes. So if all of a sudden, like, he's a third baseman, right-handed pitcher. He's obviously got a good arm. He can learn how to be a catcher. It's going to improve his versatility. Again, like maybe he ends up being a really good catcher. Like your freshman year, you really don't know what position you're going to play yet. So I think go for it, man. Try it. Learn. Dusty, I don't know, man. That's a kind of a gauntlet. Kane says, yeah, maybe. Dusty says, might be 13-17. Nothing easy. I predicted before the season 16-14. Yeah, I think it's really about like that. Those first 3 weeks, if Miami can avoid being swept, I think they're in a good position. Like, and if they do get swept one series, they have to win one of those first 3. Yeah, exactly. Like Pitt, Notre Dame, and Boston College. Like best case scenario, you sweep all 3. You're in a very good position, right? That like Miami, but Miami does have a gauntlet. Now let's look at Georgia Tech because I was looking at this last night, Dusty, or yesterday, and let's see. One of the things about Georgia Tech's schedule, Georgia Tech has a cakewalk schedule. Just to be honest, cakewalk schedule in the ACC. They do not face Florida State or UNC, who are the top teams in the ACC, like right now. The reason I think Florida State's better than UNC is because UNC, if you look at their numbers right now, like their pitching staff's doing good, their offense is doing good, but there's not like that elite component of the team yet, which is fine. If you're really good all around, you're an elite team. But like Florida State pitching wise is elite of elite. Their weekend rotation is unbelievable if you just buy the numbers. So that's why I have Florida State a little bit ahead. But Georgia Tech doesn't face either of them in conference. So now this, again, Georgia Tech's going to Virginia Tech to open up. I think it's in Blacksburg. Historically, like Georgia Tech has played very well in Blacksburg. Virginia Tech's playing decent, but I just don't think they have quite the team and the pitching to outlast Georgia Tech's offense. I think this is a 2 of 3. I don't think this is a sweep, but I think Georgia Tech wins this 2 of 3. Then it's Pitt at home. Again, like, this is a type of series that like Georgia Tech should, like, in all seriousness, like Georgia Tech's issue is that right now on Sunday, they're very shaky pitching wise. And again, like when you sweep teams, it just makes it way more likely that you're a host. And not having, like, that's been Georgia Tech's really Achilles heel for the last 4 or 5 years is the offense is elite, but on Sunday, like eventually you just don't have the pitching to get the sweep. On one of the games. So like if this is a series that Georgia Tech should sweep, and the question is like, do they sweep? A coach tries to find his best bats and figure out where to put them minus a few positions. North Dakota State blew a 9-1 lead against LSU, was making a ton of errors. Yeah, I saw that. FSU is hard because they are going to have a guaranteed win on Friday and then really hard to even split remaining 2 games. Friday night studs are so damn valuable. Yeah, but dude, Dusty, go to Florida State stats right now, and just look at their weekend rotation. Look at the 3 starters. Like Arnold's got the worst stats almost. Buck, but does Arnold go deep into games? He could be shut down, but if he's out by the 6th, then you have time to get to the bullpen. Yeah, I mean, that's a question. Like, again, like when Dusty and I were playing, like Danny Hultzen would go 8 innings every game. Like he was like Jamie Arnold, like impossible to put runs on at the college level. And he would just go 8 innings. So like you didn't have to use the bullpen as much. I do think Arnold, again, I think like early in conference now or before conference, you're protecting your starting pitcher's arms more than in years past. I do expect Arnold to, as the season progresses, to be going into the 6th and 7th inning more consistently. And then ultimately, again, there's less innings on the bullpen. But that's a good point, Buck. Like it's like you don't, the days of like a Mark Pope or a Danny Hultzen or a Carlos Rodon, and you name it, going into the 8th inning and the 9th inning, like fairly consistently, are gone. So that is something to keep in mind. But back to Georgia Tech's schedule, like this is a series they should win, and in all seriousness, probably should sweep. Then you have Notre Dame. Again, like Georgia Tech right now, if you put them on paper, like Georgia Tech is probably a much better team. So again, this is a series win potential sweep. And that's really what the ACC's turned into. It's like when you do have those few, like those 2 or 3 teams that are kind of below the pack of everybody else, like if you can sweep them, you're in really good spot. Georgia Tech then goes and they play Clemson at home, which is good. Clemson, I will say, just looking at their numbers, like offensively, they're not really driving the ball. Like offensively, they're not doing a whole lot. Like they're in that like okay at like point, but they're not even in like the really good range. And then pitching wise, it's really interesting because their ace Aiden Kanak, I think is how you say his last name, because I heard someone else say that the other day. He's got like 24 strikeouts, like 13 innings, but he's got like a 6 ERA and he's given up a lot of extra base hits and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see kind of if he's able to it seems like he is dominating, but like when he gets hit, it's for damage. But this is going to be a good matchup. I think this is, again, depending on how Georgia Tech plays these first couple series, Georgia Tech is inching closer and closer to the top 25 team. So I do think by the time this series comes along, these two could be fairly closely ranked together. So I think this is going to be a good series with a slight favor to Clemson if you were to look at it right now. Once Arnold has 100 to 110 pitches to work with, it's going to be hard to chase him before 5 innings. Yeah. Because he just like, you can't, like, it's just, the thing is, there's very few pitchers in college baseball. Like Danny Hultzen was one of them. That like, he's almost like even for your above average and your really good college hitters, it's just like such a jump in stuff and the deception and the command that like he's just going to dominate every lineup he faces. And the problem with Florida State right now is like the other 2 guys are doing the exact same thing, right? Which that'll probably change once we get in the ACC play and whatever. But still, I think right now, Florida State's probably got the best weekend rotation in the country. So this could go either way, right? This is a split. This is a 1-2, 2-1 split for Georgia Tech. Stanford, I think, again, this is on the road. I think Stanford's good. I don't think there's anything special about Stanford this year. So, again, this is kind of one of those, I think, 2-1, 1-2 splits. Cal, I think this is a definite series win. It's on the road for Cal. Going east is much harder travel-wise. I think this is a win for Georgia Tech, potential sweep. And then here's that 50-50 series with Miami and Georgia Tech. Like both of these teams, it would not surprise me by the time you get to this part of the season, they both are in the top 25. But we'll see. Then Georgia Tech at home against, like, the other thing for Georgia Tech is, like, look at a lot of these series with like considered the higher ranked schools in the country in the ACC, like Clemson at home, Virginia at home, right? So like that, you're getting home field advantage against your toughest opponents. Kyle trying hard to find a path to 17-13 for Georgia Tech. I think they do. They have the path. The path they have one of the easiest schedules in the ACC, I think. And then at the end you play Louisville, who Louisville's solid this year, but like nothing special again. And then you play Duke at the end of the year, and Duke right now is not playing like they were supposed to play at the start of the year. So I do think like strength of schedule in the ACC wise, I think Georgia Tech's got a pretty good, like a pretty easy schedule in the ACC. Like they have three series where it's realistic to predict a sweep. Again, so like let's like think about the power of sweeping. Like in 3 series, you sweep all 3, you're at 9 wins, and you got 21 games left to play. So you just need to win like 8 of 21 to get to 17 wins, right? So it's just about like our freshman year, Dusty, at Georgia Tech, like we swept a lot of teams, and we were finished 22-8 in the ACC. So like if like the whole thing is like, can you on that Sunday when you're 2-0, can you just find the killer instinct and just step on their neck and get the sweep? And I do think Georgia Tech has. Again, let's just look through. This is a sweep. Like this is a potential sweep. Like Cal is near the bottom of the ACC. They're traveling 4 hours east. Like this is a potential sweep. This is a potential sweep, even if it's in South Bend. And then this is a sweep, potential sweep. So you have 3 series where you realistically can sweep. And then the rest of the AC schedules, like you're playing like kind of the like middle of the pack, but like bottom of the middle of the pack as they're playing right now. Virginia Tech, Stanford, Cal, right? Louisville and Duke. So I think Georgia Tech really has like a really good, like they have the path to host with this schedule, right? Like imagine if you're not playing Notre Dame, you're not playing Cal, or you're not playing Pitt, and you're playing a Florida State and a UNC as well. I mean, that would be the gauntlet for real. And there's definitely someone with that schedule out there in the ACC. I haven't seen it yet, but like someone's got a real gauntlet. And that is the issue with there being 16 teams now. I do think conference play probably needs to be extended 2 more weekends, because at some point you're going to have lesser teams with better ACC records. And then all of a sudden the ACC record is not going to mean what it typically does, because you just have an easier schedule. Like you're not playing 3 of the top teams in the ACC. Like that's a lot easier schedule than another team who is. I mean, you just throw sweep around so easily. When is the last time Georgia Tech swept 3-4 teams in 1 year in the ACC? No, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. I qualified that by saying like that's been Georgia Tech's issue the last 4 or 5 years, is that they don't have the Sunday guy that can come out there like a Buck Farmer, which again, like Buck Farmer has pitched 10 years in the big leagues, but like they don't have a guy. That's a bad example. I shouldn't have said Buck Farmer. You don't have a Sunday guy who I do think we maybe end up seeing Carson Ballard on the weekend, maybe on Sunday. Because right now, if you look at the numbers, Riley Stanford, just like that, like there's no way his ERA is going to stay where it is. There's just no way it's going to stay where it is. He's giving up like almost 3 base runners per inning, which is just, that's not going to play. That's not going to play anywhere. So you need a guy on Sunday that's just going to throw strikes, and like he's going to get hit a little bit, but they don't have that right now. And if you're constantly having to get your Sunday starter out in the 3rd inning or the 4th inning, like it's going to be tough to sweep. But their offense, again, like it's elite as it can get. The offense is elite so far. So I think Miami and Georgia Tech are good case studies this year, because that's what Poman would say. Yeah. I think Miami and Georgia Tech are good case studies, because Miami's got the elite pitching and just like the good, like decent offense. And right now, Georgia Tech's got the elite offense and decent pitching so far. So it'd be interesting to see, okay, with those things in mind, which team finishes better, and that we get to see them go head to head this year. So it should be good. I mean, again, like I do think Georgia Tech's schedule is is not just favorable because they don't play UNC or Florida State, which are like, again, Florida State's the type of team that like they're going to sweep a lot of teams in the ACC. Like, no doubt to me, they're going to sweep because they're starting pitching so good, and UNC is like very very close to that. But Georgia Tech's toughest opponents, as if you look at it right now, are Clemson and Virginia. They're both at home, so your toughest opponents are at home. So that gives you, again, that makes it a little bit, tougher or easier to pull off an upset, pull up an offset. That's what I was trying to say. But let's look at some of these series that are coming up. Okay, let's look at some of these series on the weekend. Uh, let's see. All right, Auburn SEC doesn't open up for another week or two. So these are going to be Georgia's. I mean, Georgia. The one thing you say about Georgia is like their non-conference has been pretty brutal. They haven't played anybody. Georgia State played them real close last night. Georgia State's off to a really good start. I think they're 10-3 now with the loss, but they were beating Georgia for a while last night. Troy USC Upstate, this should be good. Again, I do think Troy, like the storyline at Troy this year is Skylar Meade is going to be on a lot of lists for head coaching jobs in the Power Four, or in the SEC and ACC in particular, that open up. So like that's the storyline, is like the deeper Troy goes, the better they perform, the more likely it is that Skylar Meade ain't going to be there next season. Stanford at North Carolina. This will be fun to watch just because we'll get to see Sasaki. Again, the weird thing about Sasaki, he's hitting like 360. He's got 3 doubles, but he's got no home runs, which is strange. But we'll get to see him over here on the East Coast. It wouldn't be surprised if North Carolina is going to probably win this 2 out of 3. I don't think they'll sweep, but I think it's 2 out of 3. Virginia against Boston College. Again, these are good series to watch because, like, okay, does North Carolina sweep Stanford? Does Virginia sweep Boston College? Like, we'll have an idea of like the talent level of these two teams. Coastal Carolina at East Carolina. That'll be a great series. Clemson not opening ACC yet. They're playing Davidson. Wake and Notre Dame. We'll get to see what Notre Dame can do against Wake Forest. Florida State not opening up ACC play yet. They're playing against Lipscomb. Florida, Harvard, Tennessee, St. Bonaventure. A&M against New Mexico State. This is a big one to watch. Like A&M is just not playing well. Like they won last night, but they still only scored 6 runs. So their offense is really struggling to score runs. I think they're scoring like 5 or 6 runs a game of late. So like they're just not putting runs on the board, and especially against teams they should be. So that's something to watch. Dallas Baptist against the Raging Cajuns in Louisiana Lafayette. This will be a great game. Let's see here. Our great series, LSU playing against North Alabama. It should be an easy sweep. Oklahoma, Sam Houston, Ole Miss, Jacksonville State, Texas, Santa Clara, Oregon, San Diego, Oregon State, San Diego, Oregon, Southern Cal. Should be a good series. Let's go to the ACC though. Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. This will be a good benchmark for where these teams are at in ACC play. So like just pulling up Virginia Tech stats right now. Like let's look at what they're doing. This is going to be a battle of the offenses. So let's look at the Virginia Tech. We know we knew the Georgia Tech numbers. Georgia Tech has an edge on offense. Well, okay, what are we doing here? There we go. So Georgia Tech right now, numbers are very similar. Batting average, Georgia Tech does have more extra base hits, more home runs, more doubles. Yeah, 4 p.m. first pitch. I mean, again, you have to do that though up in Virginia this early in the year because it's in Blacksburg. Yeah, so I mean it's probably cold. Virginia Tech does have more walks than strikeouts. So again, like Virginia Tech always bangs. Like they're very similar to Georgia Tech in that regard. They always like have a really good offense. So this is going to be a battle. And then like let's look at the pitching. So like what's and again, Virginia Tech has not. If you look at their schedule, uh, it's probably similar to Georgia Tech's as far as in difficulty. Probably a little bit less difficult though. So you have to keep that in mind. But look at the pitching numbers. I mean, 319. Whip at about 1.3 or 4. So very similar to Georgia Tech. Striking out a lot of dudes, a lot of swing and miss. Not giving up a lot of extra base hits. So I think this is going to be a close series. Again, it's going to be a battle of the bullpens and stuff like that. Uh, Virginia Tech does have, if we look here, their starting pitchers have done pretty well. Haven't thrown a lot of innings, and it looks like they're trying to find the guy who's maybe their Sunday guy. But Renfro and Marciano have done really well. So again, like on the road, you may even give a slight edge here to Virginia Tech. But again, the competition they've faced has not been quite as high as Georgia Tech's. So that's something to look at. North Carolina versus Stanford is the series of the weekend. You really think so? In the ACC, I think you're right. In the ACC for sure. I think Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech's probably going to be the closest series. Because I just expect UNC to beat Stanford 2-3 pretty handedly. I think the Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, I think Friday night you may see a little bit of a low scoring game, but then Saturday and Sunday it's going to be a slugfest. But you're right, Dusty. It has to be like this is a series you got to win if you're Georgia Tech. Like if you want to be a host, like you got to start out with a win here. And like I said, historically, Georgia Tech has played really well in Blacksburg, like really well. Uh, it's almost like they play better against and they've actually pretty historically played Virginia Tech just really well in general. I remember maybe 2023, Virginia Tech had a really good team. They came in and Georgia Tech swept them. Yeah, there's not a lot of really good series. Like it's actually kind of funny because like you got Florida State's playing Lipscomb again, so that's probably again like Dusty's going to say I'm throwing out the word sweep, but like that's probably a sweep for Florida State. But we'll get an idea from this weekend, especially in the ACC. Like, okay, just how good is Virginia? Like how do they beat Boston College handedly, or is it close? Wake Forest, how good are they? Do they beat Notre Dame handedly, or is it close? So we'll get to see a lot of that. Big surprise. FS Who is playing another crappy team this weekend. Well said, Zach. Well said. But Florida State's legit. Florida State is legit. Like the thing is, if pitching numbers are just like decent and you're facing bad competition, it's a really good sign that there's going to be regression. But when your pitching numbers are like elite, it's like, I think they just have an elite staff. UConn coming off a much needed W versus Miami. Yeah, I think Miami takes the series. I don't know if it's a sweep, but I just think Miami, like UConn's pitching staff has really struggled, and like UConn's offense has been decent. So like Miami's pitching staff's been elite. So like usually in that kind of matchup, that the elite pitching staff just dominates the series. So I think UConn is going. They're going down against Miami. That's my projection and prediction. But actually, I gotta go early today, guys. I have a early game today. I'll be coaching, so uh, obviously tomorrow we'll be covering a lot of this stuff as some of the games start a little bit earlier. So we'll see what we can watch. Maybe some of this Troy USC Upstate or Georgia Columbia, and then in the ACC, our earliest start is Louisville UIC is at 12, and then NC State and Pitt are playing at 3. You got Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech at 4. So we'll be looking at all that. So thanks for all the chats, guys.